Beautiful Sunday morning. How are you doing, brothers and sisters? I cannot see you in person, but I thank God for being able to see you through internet. Again, thank God and good to see you on this beautiful, blessed Sunday morning. The title of my sermon today is New Wine and New Wineskins. Our life and attitude in the era of Heavenly Parent Holy Community. This is my sermon title on this Sunday morning. First, let us hear Holy Bible, book John chapter 12 verse 23 to 25. Here you go.
Jesus replied, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life."
After passing through the Old Testament era, which lasted 4,000 years, the New Testament era, which lasted 2,000 years, we have finally come to meet true parents who restored God's 6,000 years of providence. Equally, after passing through 40 years of Unification Church era and 20 years of Family Federation for World Peace and Unification era, we finally entered the era of Chanilguk with true parents in 2013. In 2020, True Mother opened a new realm and new era, the era of Heavenly Parent Holy Community. Until the announcement of Heavenly Parent Holy Community, the 40 years of Unification Church era was the time to restore to 4,000 years of Old Testament era. And the 20 years of Family Federation was to restore the 2,000 years of New Testament era. For 20 years, Christianity spread around the world, preparing to receive the Lord of the Second Advent, the Messiah. Unfortunately, Christianity did not welcome the second coming Messiah. The foundation prepared by God was lost. In order to fulfill his mission as second coming Messiah, true parents has to make a foundation which is equivalent to the Christian foundation. That has been path of true parents for the past 60 years. After 60 years of successful journey on the true parent, we are now living in the era of Chanilguk. So, this is not Old Testament or New Testament era. This is not era of unification or Family Federation either. We are now living in new and different era, Chanilguk. We must have a new thought and new lives for the new era. Matthew 9:17 urges us to adopt a different attitude when we come into a new era. It reads,
"Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved."
If we continue to live our lives with the thought and lifestyle of the past, we'll carry out old selves into a new world. Chanilguk is the restored kingdom of a heavenly parent on earth. It is a nation of blessed central families and their children. and members who follow true parents. As Jesus said in Matthew 9:17, 천국 is a new wineskin, and we have to be a new wine. For this reason, I like to talk about the mindset and attitude of a citizen of 천국 and the Heavenly Parent Holy Community. Many Christians talk about the sacrifice of wheat grains when they say, if a grain of wheat falls to the ground and does not rot, it will remain as grain. But if it is rotten, it will produce many seeds. However, there is an important point to consider about the sacrifice of a grain of wheat. It is that the grain of wheat does not die. It does not rot and never disappears. The grain of wheat falls to the ground and becomes a nutrient for new birth. So we shouldn't say the grain of wheat which was buried in the ground sacrificed itself for sprouting new seed. If the grain of wheat decays and sacrifices to give birth to the new life, then the egg must say the same. Think about the egg. We don't say that one egg dies and a chick comes out, right? Grain of wheat and sprout are the continuation of living beings and the creation of new ones. A grain of wheat falls to the ground and grows into a sprout and bears many grains of wheat. The reason I am talking about a grain of wheat today is because I thanked many of our members who walked with true parents in my last sermon. Do you remember? We know that some people often say that they sacrifice like a wheat to make today's Wineskins church. The premise of our sacrifice is investment and hard work. It is often said that we made sacrifices when we put public work ahead of our personal lives, invested in public work, and work hard. Sacrifice often involves the loss of individual's life and the loss of a family. Some lost their health. So that is why people do not want to live a sacrificial life or are afraid to be involved. It is because it implies that pain will follow and eventually will rot and die like grain of wheat. So, in the era of 천국, the lives of the member of the Heavenly Parent Holy Community should not be like rotten and sacrificed grains, but must be revived and thrive with new lives. Wheat has a 1-year life cycle. Wheat has a 1-year life cycle, right? However, human lives at least 80 years or 90 years, probably 100 years. Therefore, the life of a grain of wheat and human life cannot be compared. The grain of wheat, which Jesus is talking about, fall into the ground and sprout, symbolize Christian resurrection. Here, resurrection does not mean that we are dying and being reborn, but that we are becoming a new person. A grain of wheat falls to the ground once a year and produces many grains with the new bird sprout. Our hard work and effort is like a grain of wheat. They shouldn't be like sacrifices on altar. Our hard work, effort, and investment have to be similar to a grain of wheat, which is a nutrient for new birth, new sprout. Through that nutrient, it needed to sprout and grow to make many, many grains. In other words, if our hard work, effort, and investment become inspiration and grace, not sacrifice, through that inspiration and grace, we can gain strength and do more God's work. Right? 아주? Yes, amen. And that inspiration and grace will enable us to continue to grow. It is as if a grain of wheat falls to the ground and sprouts a bird to produce many grains. Unfortunately, many people who have believed in the parable of the rotting grain of wheat so far have literally become grains of wheat and have fallen to the ground and rot. Our hard work, effort, and investment should be life-giving offerings and not burnt offering or sacrifices. God does not need martyrs, resentful sons and daughters who complain about sacrifices they have made. God needs champions, victors, and happy investors, and co-creators who can rejoice with Him in His kingdom on earth and in heaven. Our goal, as God's chosen sons and daughters, should therefore be to happily participate with God in giving life, in supporting and multiplying life. Creation requires effort, dedication, hard work, complete investment, focus. It requires us to pour ourselves, not to kill ourselves. Success never comes to those who don't invest. Consider a mother giving birth. A mother totally invests and pushes herself to the brink of death to give birth to a new life. At the end, mother lives and gives birth to a new life. What are some of the things we call hard work, effort, and investment as we follow the path of faith? What are those in our faith? Think about. You may think number 1 is witnessing, right? Number 2, offering. Number 3, mobilization, especially for our movement. Number 4, volunteering. So on. It is traditionally studied that the standard of offering is 10%. So we believe that we give 10% of our profit. Then can you do 10% of witnessing, mobilization, and volunteer work? Is there anyone who works at least 2¼ hours a day, which is 10% of 24 hours, including our sleeping hours? We cannot say that 10% of our lives have been offered to God, right? Let's consider the grain analogy again. If the grain falls to the ground and only 10% become nutrient for the bird, can new sprout grow? If only 10% of the eggs provide nutrient to the newly born chick, would it be possible to have a chick? It is the same with the humans. In order for human being to be born again, we cannot be born as 10%. If I had a bad idea of 100% and only 10% change there, then I only change the 10%. However, we humans have received special blessings and love from God. God has allowed it 10% offering. Our 10% offering is equivalent or equal to 100% of the wheat grain and 100% of egg. We have to accomplish a miracle in that 10% offering. We must have a miracle of 10% in order to be resurrected. And with the second blessing from God, we have been blessed to achieve 100% with the miracle of that 10%. Finally, God gave us a third blessing which can be achieved through the 10% of our offering to God. God doesn't expect us to sacrifice our lives. He only expects to complete our portion, which is 10% of what is required to achieve victory. Do you understand what I mean? Do you follow? As a small example, many people testify that they have been blessed with a lot of wealth and material resources thanks to the 10% of offering they have made. However, there's no one who said they were bankrupt because they gave a 10% contribution. Did you hear? For me, I never heard. 10% of our offering are like a grain of wheat. We shouldn't sacrifice wheat as people think. Just like a grain of wheat sprouts, you must achieve miracle of 10%. It is wheat itself that blows the wheat to the ground. Who is watering the wheat that has fallen on the ground? Who is watering? Jesus or your parents, right? Then who should sprout? It is wheat itself. Jesus or true parents cannot sprout the wheat that has fallen to the ground. As the wheat itself sprouts, we must resurrect ourselves and be born again. Jesus or true parents can give us grace or inspiration. But Jesus or true parents cannot make us be resurrected or reborn. Resurrection and rebirth are our responsibility. Our 10% miracle of offering to God is not made by Jesus or true parent. It's what we must make. We have to make it. Through 10%, we must receive our own grace and inspiration. Then 10% of our offering become 100% and we grow. In other words, 10% is my responsibility and 90% is God's blessing. The condition of God's blessing can only be fulfilled when our 10% responsibility is fulfilled. It means that when I fulfill my 10% responsibility, I can become 100% grain of wheat. This understanding of 10% blessing is one of a good example on how we can be better citizen of Cheonilguk and member of Heavenly Parent Holy Community. Like a new wine in its new wineskin. In conclusion, 10% responsibility are blessing that God has given only to human. Again, 10% responsibilities are blessing that God has given only to human. We shouldn't feel that we sacrifice ourselves through this 10%. It shouldn't be our burden. 10% should be a grace and inspiration to us, leading to resurrection and rebirth. In era of 천일국, there are no sacrifice for blessed central family members of the Heavenly Parent Holy Community. Heavenly Parent have not blessed us with sacrifice. Heavenly Parents has blessed us with grace and resurrection. Our 10% offering to Heavenly Parents must be grain of wheat which enrich whole world. This is the blessing of a citizen of 천일국, brothers and sisters. 아주 아멘. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Heavenly Parent and true parents bless you and bless your family. And see you next Sunday. God bless you.